Mike had always considered himself a man of quiet routines and steady purpose. Each dawn, he rose before the world fully awoke, lacing up his boots in the soft gray light and filling a simple stainless steel bowl with water. In the stillness of his modest home, a small patch of sunlight crept across the floorboards, illuminating the gentle rise and fall of Luna's flanks as she slept curled at the foot of his bed. He remembered the day he first held her, just a brindle puppy thrust into his arms by a weary rescue worker, her tiny body trembling, her eyes wide with both fear and fierce curiosity. He could still feel the thrum of her heartbeat against his palms, a promise of untamed loyalty waiting to be nurtured. Over the years, they had woven their lives into a tapestry of shared rituals. Every morning, Luna would nudge him awake with her cold, wet nose, tail wagging as though it carried the rhythm of his heart. They would walk along the winding trails of Evergreen Park, inhaling the scent of pine and damp earth, the world awakening around them in birdsong and rustling leaves. In those moments, Mike believed there was no bond more profound than the one between man and dog, a companionship unspoiled by words, one that spoke in quiet gestures and unwavering devotion. When Luna was a year old, her favorite game had been to chase sunlight dancing through the living room windows. She would leap and spin, the light catching the edges of her fur as if fireflies had taken permanent residence in her coat. Mike would watch with quiet amusement, sometimes tossing a plush toy across the room just to see her pirouette and vault. After it, in the evenings, they shared the same beaten leather armchair, Luna's head resting in his lap, Mike's fingers combing through her soft ears. He would recount the events of the day, a tough shift at the clinic, a neighbor in need of a hand, the quiet victories of another animal saved. Luna listened, her big brown eyes absorbing every inflection, as though she understood the weight of his words. Life felt simple but rich. Neighbors knew them as inseparable, the duo who delivered meals to an elderly couple down the street, who volunteered at the weekend adoption fairs, who spread an almost infectious warmth wherever they went. Yet beneath Mike's steadfast smile lay a vulnerability he shared with no one, a lingering fear that at any moment, the fragile comfort of routine could crack under the weight of unforeseen tragedy. That moment came on a rain-slicked night when Mike's car skidded on black ice, sending him careening off the road. The impact shattered glass and bones alike, and when he awoke in the sterile hum of the hospital, the world felt hollow. He reached instinctively for Luna's collar, his breath catching when he realized she wasn't there. Regulations required that family members arrange care for their pets before admission, a detail Mike, in his shock, had forgotten. The nurses explained gently that Luna had been taken to the county shelter, her holding period pending his discharge. He nodded, words failing him, and the next days became a blur of painkillers and hallways. Meanwhile, Luna padded anxiously through a row of cramped kennels, her bright spirit dimmed by the echoing clang of gates and the unfamiliar scent of antiseptic. Volunteers called her Bella in error. Strangers reached through the bars, offering scraps of food and hollow promises. She pressed her damp nose to the mesh, eyes trained on every face that passed, waiting for the one she knew. Each day felt identical until dusk fell and the corridor lights buzzed on, casting long shadows where laughter once danced. Back in his hospital bed, Mike pressed bruised fingers to his lips, willing himself to remember exactly how her fur felt beneath his touch. He made frantic calls to shelters, filled out paperwork, offered to pay for any extra carand, waited. In the quiet hours before dawn, he closed his eyes and could almost hear her soft exhale beside him, a phantom presence that both comforted and tormented him. Nurse shifts changed, doctors switched places, but his vigil never wavered. If hope was a fragile ember, Mike guarded it with the last of his strength. They were worlds apart, one confined by metal bars, the other by a mismatched cast and hospital walls. At each heartbeat carried the same longing. Across the miles, separated by circumstance and protocol, their souls reached for one another in a silent pleat-a-bridge. The chasm fate had created. Mike lay in the hospital bed, nursing broken bones and a fractured heart, haunted by the echo of Luna's absence. Luna paced the edges of her kennel, confused and alone in a sea of unfamiliar faces. Yet both held fast to a single, unspoken truth. No barrier could extinguish the bond that had defined their world. The morning after Mike's discharge unfolded in a haze of exhaustion and mounting dread. His casted arm throbbed with every heartbeat, a constant reminder of the night his world had tilted sideways. The hospital staff had escorted him to a cab, gently warning him not to exert himself. But Mike's mind was already racing miles away, trailing the scent of home and the memory of a familiar paw at his side. The ride felt interminable. Each traffic light seemed to mock his desperation. When he finally pushed open his front door, the silence within felt oppressive. Luna's absence echoed in every empty corner, no soft patting of paws, no eager nod greeting him at the threshold. Inside, the living room bore the faint imprint of her presence. A single chew toy lay abandoned beneath the armchair, its stuffing protruding like the ragged phrase of his own fractured heart. He rested his uninjured hand against the doorframe, closing his eyes and summoning the warmth of her breath against his skin. It was as though the room itself grieved for her. A voicemail from the county shelter blinked on his phone. Luna had arrived 2 nights earlier, spayed and unclaimed, her holding period impending. Mike replayed the message 3 times, the volunteer's gentle voice offering dates and forms, a bureaucratic litany that felt impossible to complete from a hospital bed. Days blurred into one another as Mike balanced recovery with frantic rescue attempts. He sat at his laptop for hours, filling out digital forms, uploading photos of Luna in every imaginable pose, her floppy ears perked inquisitively, her head cocked at a tilt, the tiniest wrinkle between her brows as she sniffed at a new scent. Each image was a testament to the bond they shared, and each submission felt like a lifeline cast into uncertain waters. He phoned the shelter daily, speaking to rotating staff who knew his name but not his story, and who assured him she was safe yet likely growing more anxious in her kennel. Meanwhile, Luna navigated the shelter's strict routine, her ebony muzzle dusted with kibble crumbs, her bright eyes scanning every new face for a hint of recognition. Volunteers recorded kennel notes. She was gentle, calm, highly social with other dogs, but she had not responded to the usual calls of "Here Bella." As they approached her chain-link enclosure, the mishmash of names seemed to heighten her confusion. She would press her forehead against the cold wire, tilting her head as if puzzling out a forgotten puzzle piece. In the evenings, when the ambient chatter faded and the shelter lights dimmed, she would let out a single plaintive whine, an echo of the last night she lay sleeping beside Mike. Unaware that morning would bring separation instead of sunrise, at home, Mike's progress was faltering. Physical therapy dictated gentle exercises. Yet every stretch sent a jolt of longing through Jaime, desire to scoot across the floor and scoop Luna into his arms. He scribbled reminders on sticky notes, call health department, renew ID tags, visit shelter, but the tasks felt insurmountable through the lens of lingering pain. Friends offered rides and assistance, but Mike declined. Unwilling to shift the weight of Luna's fate onto another's shoulders, he convinced himself that each phone call, each form submission, was an act of devotion, a small beacon illuminating the path back to her. Yet time was slipping away. The shelter's policy dictated that unclaimed animals could be made available for adoption after 7 days. Mike's heart pounded at the thought that someone else might bring home the dog he had raised from a trembling pup, the one who had slept with her nose burrowed in his sleeve, whom he had promised to love forever. His nights were haunted by half-remembered dreams of black wire cages closing around him, of Luna's eyes fading into the distance as doors clanged shut. Each dawn brought fresh resolve and fresh fear. In the quiet lull between check-ins, Mike closed his eyes and spoke to the memory of Luna. He imagined her wide, trusting gaze, the little bark she reserved only for him, the way she would lean into his side after a long day. He vowed, silently but fiercely, that no administrative detail nor physical barrier would sever the tether between them. Somewhere, in a room bright with fluorescent lights and lined with kennels, Luna waited as unresolved as he was, her faith unbroken, her hope as boundless as his own, separated by sterile walls and red tape. Mike battles both physical pain and relentless deadlines, while Luna paces her kennel in growing confusion. Yet, amid the ticking clock and mounting regulations, a shared resolve kindles, a promise neither is willing to let fade. The first dawn without Luna felt as if the sun had forgotten to rise. Mike woke in an empty room, his body aching from yesterday's therapy and his heart aching from a different kind of pain. The silence was suffocating, no soft thump of paws padding across the hardwood floor, no hopeful nudge urging him toward breakfast. He forced himself out of bed and into his caste-limited routine, a ginger tea, a gentle stretch under the watchful eye of physical therapy instructions, then settling into his desk chair to face the day's newest shelter emails. Each message held the same refrain: Luna was safe, but still unclaimed. A small relief, yet his chest constricted at the reminder that she remained alone behind metal bars. Across town, Luna's mornings began in the antiseptic chill of the kennel area. The shelter's routine was rigid: breakfast at 7, kennel, cleaning next, then a mid-morning walk for the most outgoing dogs. Volunteers called her Bella as they clipped on her leash, unaware of the identity crisis she carried. She responded automatically to the rustle of a towel, to the jangle of keys, but her tail wag was mechanical, devoid of the exuberance Mike knew so well. Instead, she pressed her cheek against the volunteer's palm as though seeking reassurance. "You will bring me home, won't you?" But each hand retreated through the bars, and the leash guided her back to isolation. While Mike's world had contracted to the four walls of his apartment and the digital windows of webcam shelter tours, Luna's universe was defined by kennel walls and shifting strangers. The strangers were kind. They offered extra treats when she lay quietly, stroked her soft brindle coat, and murmured encouragement. But none spoke the language of inside jokes or whispered bedtime secrets. None knew that when Luna laid her head on Mike's lap, she was conveying the deepest gratitude she felt in the world. An unspoken promise that she would guard him as he guarded her. That understanding was lost now, swallowed by procedural formalities and the clatter of cleaning carts. At home, Mike occupied the hours as best he could. He drafted a detailed timeline of Luna's movements since the accident, marking each phone call, each email, each form submission. He reviewed every photograph he had. Luna in midlip chasing snowflakes. Luna curled beside him on a summer afternoon. Luna tilting her head quizzically at a squeaky toy. Each image summoned a pang of guilt that he had let her slip from his grasp, and a steely determination to bring her back. He reached out to local rescue networks, posting pleas on community boards, offering reward money for any information. Yet every response was either generic advice, check the shelter registry, or condolences from people who didn't understand that Luna was more than just a namatag and a kennel number. Meanwhile, Luna's spirits wavered between hope and despair. She had learned the shelter's routine: breakfast brought in a metal bowl, water refreshed twice a day, a leash outing after lunch. But the spaces in between were endless. She spent hours at the fence line, her paw scraping the concrete as though trying to carve a path back to the car rides and trail walks she once took with Mike. When other dogs railed at visitors, her voice was a soft whimper through the wire. Watching the other dogs adopted one by one a frisky terrier, a timid senior spaniel, she felt the sharp sting of rejection. Even though no one had chosen her simply for being left behind, friends of Mike's dropped by to check on his recovery. They offered casseroles and errands, picking up groceries or driving him to therapy appointments. Despite their kindness, Mike declined when they asked if he would like to visit the shelter again. He couldn't bear the thought of seeing Luna caged in person without having the power to open the door. Instead, he instructed them to photograph her if they saw her, to note any change in her behavior. He imagined the shelter staff marking the same kennel notes he'd growled about in his frustration. Bella remains calm, friendly with people and dogs, no known health issues. The facts were comforting but cruel: friendly, healthy, adoptable but not recognized by the one who mattered most. One afternoon, Mike's physical therapist noted his distracted state. She asked him to focus on the present moment, on the stretch of his arm, the alignment of his shoulder. He nodded, but his thoughts raced elsewhere. He pictured Luna chasing a phantom scent along a fence line, her ears perked in curiosity but her eyes mirroring confusion. He felt her loneliness in the dull ache of his ribs and the guarded way his hand hovered over his side waiting to stroke her head. Therapy finished, he excused himself and retreated to the living room, where he dialed the shelter's front desk once more. The familiar automated message greeted him: "Press 1 for lost pets." He pressed the button, each digit echoing in his chest, and waited for a human voice that could give him both answers and hope. At the shelter, the volunteer on duty recited the protocol. Luna's holding period was extended by 3 days after her spay surgery, which meant she couldn't be adopted immediately. They would keep her an extra week to allow recovery and rehoming. The news was a bomb and a trial. He now had more days, but still, the ticking clock that defined the shelter's limited resources. He scribbled the new deadline on a whiteboard beside his desk, underlining it twice. He refused to let these added days slip away in bureaucratic haze. At home, he began drafting flyers for veterinary offices and pet stores, highlighting Luna's unique markings and sweet temperament. He printed copies and made plans to post them immediately upon clearance from his doctor. That night, Luna lay curled in her kennel, backlit by the glow of hallway lamps. She had not slept peacefully since her arrival. Every rustle in the night footsteps, the creak of a door jolted her to wakefulness. When the lights dimmed, she pressed her muzzle between the bars and let out a soft sigh, as though longing for Mike's steady breath beside her. She closed her eyes, imagining the comforting scent of his shirt, the steady thump of his heart. against her cheek. In sleep, she dreamed of car rides and pine-scented trails, of a hand scratching her behind the ears until she drifted into comforted slumber. Two worlds existed now, one confined by a recovering body, the other by a lonely kennel, but a shared thread of tenacity bound them. Each had given voice to longing, Mike through impassioned phone calls and public posts, Luna through the subtle plead of her eyes and the patient tilt of her head, even separated by distance and walls. Their spirits intertwined in a silent vow. They would find each other again, no matter the obstacles in the way. In isolated routines, Mike's therapy-bound days and Luna's lonely kennel nights, their unbreakable bond pulses with raw longing, though distance and regulation conspire to keep them apart. Each heartbeat carries the same promise: they will reunite, whatever it takes. The morning light filtered weakly through Mike's living room curtains, carrying with it a chill that seemed to seep into his bones. His arm throbbed with renewed intensity, every pulse a reminder that his body was still healing and that time was slipping away. An unexpected setback in his physical therapy had left him doubting his progress. A sharp twinge in his shoulder threatened to undo weeks of painstaking exercises. As he stared at the laptop screen, a new email notification from the shelter blinked into view. His heart pounded in anticipation, only to sink when he read the words, "Due to overcrowding, we are at capacity and must prioritize space for urgent intakes." Luna's kennel number was printed in the upper corner of the message, as if she was merely one more statistic in an endless tide of lost and abandoned souls. Mike's chest tightened as he imagined volunteers shuffling through rows of cages, pressing urgent cases forward and leaving Luna to drift further into anonymity. Meanwhile, at the shelter, Luna faced her own crisis. A routine health check revealed a mild infection, urinary tract issue that required immediate veterinary attention. The volunteer who knelt beside her kennel described the signs: frequent discomfort, a restlessness that had replaced her usual calm demeanor. For Luna, each antiseptic scent and clinic sound triggered a cascade of confusion and fear. She remembered only fleeting fragments of safety: the warmth of Mike's hand coaxing her into calm, the steady thrum of his heart as he whispered reassurances. Now she shivered on the metal floor of her temporary ward, her body fighting an unseen adversary, while her spirit grappled with isolation. The vet bill mounted on the shelter's desk, a silent ledger of the care provided. And yet Luna's fate remained tethered to a man trapped in his own recovery and to rules that seemed designed to keep them apart. In the quiet of his apartment, Mike wrestled with a storm of guilt and frustration. He replayed the moment of Luna's diagnosis in his mind, imagining her eyes widening at each prod of a thermometer, her soft whine echoing through the treatment room. He scrolled through his insurance paperwork, searching for coverage details that might alleviate the shelter's burden, but the fine print mocked him with exclusions and waiting periods. Memories of their earlier life together flickered through his thoughts. Luna bounding across a snow-dusted lawn, her coat glistening with frost. The gentle way she leaned into him when a thunderstorm rattled the windows. Those recollections burned bright against the gray reality of medical forms and kennel bars. He drafted another email, pressing into his own shame as he begged the shelter for updates, for priority status, for any means of accelerating Luna's care and release. Yet every response came with polite caution. Policies were policies, and exceptions were rare. As dusk fell, the weight of their parallel struggles pressed in on both. Mike's exhaustion manifested as a restless pacing in his living room, his mind cycling through worst-case scenarios, Luna's condition worsening, another dog claiming her spot, the finality of adoption slipping through his fingers. He paused to run a hand over the photos taped to his wall. Luna's bright eyes in a sunlit meadow, her joyful leap as she caught a falling leaf. He whispered an apology into the dim room, promising he would not give up. At the same hour, Luna lay in a sterile clinic kennel, her infection treated but her spirit frail. She pressed her muzzle against the cage, as though searching for a familiar scent, her breath shallow but determined. Somewhere beyond these walls, Mike's promise drifted through the air, a tether of hope that neither clinic lights nor hospital beds could sever. In the hush between patient monitors and the steady beep of an IV drip, their shared resolve glowed like a beacon. Adversity would test them, but it would not define them. Caught between medical crises and bureaucratic bottlenecks, Mike battles debilitating pain and procedural gridlock while Luna fights physical illness and shelter overcrowding. Yet amid these compounding trials, their unspoken vow remains intact, a slender thread of hope promising that no barrier can hold them apart forever. A soft ray of sunlight filtered through the bars of Luna's recovery kennel, casting long shadows on the concrete floor as a new volunteer knelt beside her. Anna had only begun fostering through the shelter's temporary care program a week earlier, but something about Luna's quiet resilience moved her to request this case. With tentative hands, Anna lifted Luna onto a plush bed of towels and carried her to a foster home that smelled of lavender and fresh linens so different from the antiseptic chill of the shelter. Luna's eyes widened at the unfamiliar surroundings. A cozy living room with a cushioned couch, a low coffee table scattered with magazines, and 2 large windows overlooking a sunlit garden. Anna spoke softly, reassuring her that she was safe, that someone cared deeply enough to bring her here. For the first time in days, Luna's tail gave a hopeful wag, and she settled beside Anna's feet, her body relaxing as she inhaled the scent of home. Meanwhile, back in his apartment, Mike sat hunched over his laptop, reviewing a stack of emails and social posts. A friend in a neighboring town had shared a local rescuer's message board link, a promising tip that Luna might have been seen at a different intake center on the far side of the county. The message described a brindle dog matching her distinctive markings, found wandering near a lakeside campground. Heart-pounding, Mike printed the post and circled the volunteer coordinator's contact information. His casted arm throbbed, but adrenaline lent him strength as he planned a road trip, first to the intake center, then back to the shelter, where Luna now lived under foster care. Even with his limited mobility, he refused to wait for permission. Every mile felt like a step closer to her. Anna spent the afternoon administering Luna's antibiotics and preparing a soft meal, chicken and rice boiled to tenderness, stirred with a spoon until it resembled porridge. Luna ate with measured bites, pausing to look at Anna as if to confirm that kindness could still taste like safety. Later, Luna was coaxed to the garden for a short walk on a leash. She sniffed at each blade of grass, her muzzle brushing against daisies that nodded in the gentle breeze. Anna noticed the way Luna's shoulders lifted when a butterfly drifted by, and for the first time in her shelter notes, she wrote words like joyful and curious. At day's end, Mike called the intake center. The coordinator confirmed the sighting. Luna had indeed arrived at their doors 3 weeks ago before being transferred for medical treatment. The intake center had logged her microchip number and forwarded her records to the county shelter where Anna now cared for her. Relief washed through him, but it was tinged with urgency. Luna's foster period would soon conclude, and without a finalized adoption plan, she risked returning to the shelter. Mike shared his plan with Anna over a video call, his voice gentle but resolute. He thanked her for reopening Luna's world and asked if she could extend the foster period by just a few more days. Anna agreed without hesitation, moved by the depth of his devotion. 2 days later, Anna snapped a photo of Luna lounging on the back porch steps, her brindle coat gleaming in the golden light. She posted it to the shelter's private group with a note: "She's doing so well, would love to keep her here a bit longer if we can find her person." The post reached Mike's feed like a beacon. He hit reply: "That's my girl. Please hold her until I can get there." Within minutes, Anna's thumbs tapped out a response: "Absolutely. I'm in your corner." In that exchange, miles felt bridged by shared compassion, and Luna's world expanded from a kennel cell to the caring arms of people, united in one purpose: bringing her back to the man she loved. Separated no longer by helpless waiting, Luna discovers a haven in foster care while Mike uncovers a vital lead. Each small breakthrough ignites fresh hope that soon the chasm between them will collapse beneath the weight of their unbreakable bonda. Week after Anna agreed to extend Luna's foster stay, the shelter's urgent email arrived. The foster program was at capacity, and Luna needed to return to the main facility immediately. Mike's chest tightened as he read the notice. Despite every effort to secure her safety, bureaucratic limits outweighed personal pleas. He scrambled to call Anna, who answered with a tremor of empathy in her voice. "I'm so sorry," she said. "They need her bed for a special needs dog." Luna's haven dissolved beneath her paws, and within hours she was loaded into the back of a shelter van, her eyes scanning for Anna's familiar face. The ride felt interminable, each mile pounding against her ribs like her own panicked heartbeat. Back in her kennel, the antiseptic scent and metal bars greeted her with cold indifference once more. Mike rushed to the shelter as soon as Anna confirmed Luna's return. Despite his doctor's warning to rest the injured arm, he gripped the steering wheel with his one good hand, every bump in the road sending sparks of pain through his shoulder. By the time he arrived, the sun was dipping below the horizon, and the kennel area was cloaked in orange twilight. Volunteers were already feeding the evening group. Luna's head was lowered as she ate, a stark contrast to the joyful dog he remembered. When he knelt before her enclosure, her eyes flicked upward, then darted away, uncertain whether this was another stranger or the man she'd known. He pressed his palm flat against the cool metal mesh and whispered her name, voice raw with urgency. Luna's tail gave a small, hesitant wag, but she didn't move closer. A fresh wave of guilt crashed over him. He had brought her here, and yet he was powerless to free her. That same night, Mike learned that the intake center's initial sighting had been a different brindle dog. Entirely one with nearly identical markings but a distinct muzzle shape. His lead evaporated like mist, leaving his plans threadbare. He pored over maps and shelters' online databases, only to find dead ends and mismatched descriptions. Friends who had offered support now sounded apologetic, as though they carried blame for his fruitless search. In the silence of his apartment, he replayed every decision since the accident, accusing himself of bungling the rescue, forgetting to arrange long-term care, underestimating the shelter's policies, trusting an unverified tip. Each memory felt like a blow, and by dawn he was hollowed by despair. Meanwhile, Luna's health began to falter under the stress of repeated transfers. The infection that had seemed resolved flared again, and shelter staff whisked her back to the kennel clinic. She lay on a stainless steel table, eyes averted, muscles tensed in fear. The veterinarian administered medication and instructed the team to monitor her closely and to note that each return to the shelter aggravated her condition. Volunteers whispered among themselves, worried that Luna's prospects dimmed with every failing health check. No one realized her spirit was tethered to the man who waited outside, grappling with pain of his own. With Luna readmitted to medical care, Mike reached out to local animal advocates, desperate for any avenue that could expedite her recovery and prevent adoption by another family. He offered to pay for private boarding or arrange a home visit once he was able, but shelter policies balked at exceptions. His pleas landed in circular inboxes, and each automated acknowledgement deepened his frustration. At work, colleagues noticed his distraction. At night, his dreams replayed Luna's soft whines in sterile corridors. In waking hours, he measured his resolve against the harsh reality that each passing day eroded both their endurance. Yet, amid this swell of setbacks, a faint spark remained embedded in every cuddle shared in happier times, in every memory of trust and loyalty, even as regulations and missteps threatened to pull them further apart. The invisible thread that bound Mike and Luna persisted, pulsing with a determination neither illness nor policy could fully extinguish as Luna endures repeat health scares and shelter transfers, and Mike faces misidentified leads and rigid regulations. Their path forward darkens, but a flicker of shared faith gleams in their intertwined memories, hinting that rescue may still be within reach. Mike's phone buzzed at dawn, shattering the uneasy calm that had settled over his apartment. Bleary-eyed, he read the message from a compassionate shelter volunteer he'd met weeks ago. A retired police canine handler named Jorge believed he'd spotted Luna at a secondary holding facility on the outskirts of town. The description was precise: same brindle coat, identical white blaze on her chest. The gentle curve of her ears and an accompanying photo matched Luna's soulful gaze. Mike's heart thundered as he mapped the route, every turn on the GPS a heartbeat counting down to reunion. He dressed quickly, securing his cast in a stabilizing sling, and summoned a rideshare determination lending him strength. Meanwhile, Luna lay atop fresh straw in the secondary facility's quarantine wing, the scent of disinfectant mingling with hay and the faint aroma of pine trees drifting through an open window. The world beyond her bars felt muted, but a distant male voice carried on the morning breeze, seasoned with familiarity. Her ears lifted, tilting toward the sound as though tuning into a remembered melody. She rose, limbs stiff but driven by instinct, and pressed her muzzle against the wire partition. The voice grew closer, low gravel-toned, calling her name with a cadence only she would recognize. Back in the van, Mike replayed Jorge's directions, willing every red light to turn green. Pain flared in his arm with each bump, but he barely noticed, his focus fixed on the promise of Luna's face. At the facility's shaded entrance, he stepped out into the humid air, breath-catching as he saw rows of kennels lined against the fencing. Volunteers moved between them, carrying bowls and towels, unaware that one kennel held a story years in the making. Mike approached the nearest staff member, showing her Luna's photo and explaining his connection. Her eyes softened with understanding, and without hesitation she led him down the gravel path to Kennel 14. Inside, Luna's body trembled with a cocktail of hope and confusion as the staff member clicked open the latch. Mike knelt at the gate, voice cracking as he whispered her name. Luna's head snapped up, her eyes finding his through the mesh. Time stilled in that moment. The world beyond the fence pane, bureaucracy, endless separation fell away. She burst forward, her nails scraping concrete as she bounded into his arms. Mike enveloped her in the tightest hug he could muster, tears blurring his vision as Luna's warm body pressed into his chest and her wagging tail thumped like a drum of celebration. Around them, volunteers paused, smiles breaking across weary faces. But for Mike and Luna there was nothing but the soft thud of reunited hearts, in the charged hush after Destiny's summons. Mike and Luna's gazes lock across metal bars, igniting a surge of hope that catastrophe and protocol could not extinguish. The long-awaited reunion stands just beyond the gate's click dot at the moment the kennel gate swung open. Time itself seemed to pause. Mike's heart hammered against his ribs as he stepped forward into the narrow corridor, careful of each step so as not to jostle his injured arm. Luna, roused by the sudden movement, lifted her head from the straw and blinked against the pale light filtering through the high windows. For a breathless second, neither moved. Then recognition bloomed in her eyes, like sunrise. She scrambled to her feet, nails clicking on the concrete as she bounded toward him, mouth open in a joyous pant. That sounded like laughter. Mike sank to his knees, tears blurring his vision as he reached out with both hands. One still cast in a sling, trying to cradle her face without frightening her in his excitement. Luna pressed her muzzle into his palm, her tail a furious metronome of relief, and finally pressed her forehead against his chest, as if to check that he was real. He gathered her into his arms, cradling her head against his shoulder, and let the years of worry, guilt, and pain pour out in a choked sob. Luna responded with soft whines and wet kisses, as though each lick could stitch together the hours they'd lost. Around them, the shelter's usual clamor faded into a hush. Kennel doors closing. Distant footsteps, hushed questions, none of it mattered now. In that embrace, man and dog spoke the only language they'd ever needed, pure, unguarded love. Mike whispered apologies and promises he would never leave her side again. He would make this right forever. Luna tilted her head, eyes bright and trusting, as though accepting his vow without hesitation. Volunteers hovered respectfully at the door, their faces soft with emotion. One placed a gentle hand on Mike's shoulder, offering tissues and quiet congratulations. Another snapped a single photograph of the reunion, careful not to break the sacred intimacy of the moment. But Mike and Luna scarcely noticed. Their world had contracted to the span of that hug, a universe in which only they existed. Finally, Mike steadied himself and rose, Luna's leash secured in his free hand. Her steps were unsteady at first, but with each stride alongside him, her confidence grew. As they passed through the final gate into the shelter's front yard, a gentle breeze carried the scent of grass and fresh air. Freedom at last, earned by patience and unwavering faith in the hush of a swinging gate and the tangle of broken tears. Luna and Mike rediscover a bond that transcends loss and separation, proof that no amount of distance or despair can extinguish a love forged in unwavering loyalty. The drive home was quiet, punctuated only by the soft thud of Luna's tail against the passenger seat as she leaned into Mike's hand for reassurance. Back at their doorstep, Luna paused at the threshold, nostrils flaring as she reacquainted herself with the scent of home-warm wood, vanilla candle on the mantel, and the lingering aroma of Mike's favorite coffee. She stepped inside hesitantly, then launched into an ecstatic trot through the living room, nose to the floor, tail wagging like a metronome of bliss. Mike followed slowly, every room a landmark of memories renewed, her favorite cushion by the window, the scattering of chew toys beneath the armchair, the faded photograph of puppy Luna clipping in the corner. That evening, Mike prepared a simple celebration: lean chicken breast chopped into bite-sized pieces and mixed with brown rice, served in Luna's stainless steel bowl. She ate eagerly, pausing only to look up at him with bright, trusting eyes before resuming. Afterward, they settled side by side on the couch, Luna's head resting on Mike's lap as he stroked her ears. The steady rhythm of her breathing balmed to the wounds of the past weeks. He whispered promises into her fur. No more goodbyes. No more unfamiliar faces. Only the certainty of tomorrow's sunrise and the comfort of shared mornings. News of their reunion rippled through the shelter community. Volunteers who had watched Luna's journey posted congratulatory messages and photos, marveling that a dog once deemed at risk had found her way home. Local adopters paused their searches to send well wishes, and a small fundraiser launched to support other animals caught in limbo. Through every message, the theme was clear: Hope endures when compassion leads, in the gentle glow of homecoming meals and shared quiet moments. Mike and Luna embark on a renewed journey, proof that even the darkest trials can give way to a future built on loyalty. In the soft afterglow of their reunion, Mike and Luna's journey stands as a testament to the transformative power of unwavering faith and compassionate persistence. Through every trial, accident, separation, illness, and bureaucracy, they held fast to a bond forged in love and trust, proving that even the most daunting obstacles cannot sever a connection built on mutual devotion. Their story invites us to remember that hope often dwells in the smallest gestures: a volunteer's kindness, a foster home's warmth, a single phone call fueled by determination. It encourages us to look beyond statistics and policies, to see each animal and each individual as unique stories waiting for a chance to be rewritten. As Mike and Luna step into their renewed life, one of daily walks through sun-dappled parks, quiet evenings curled together on a familiar sofa, and shared promises of forever, they embody the profound lesson that care and empathy can heal wounds unseen. May their triumph inspire viewers to offer patience to the overlooked, to advocate for those without a voice, and to believe that every act of kindness, no matter how small, carries the power to change a life. And the warmth of home's embrace, and the echo of gentle promises, Mike and Luna reflect on battles won and lessons learned, reminding us that when hearts stay true, even the longest separations yield to the promise of unwavering loyalty.